Chris Carter was born in Palo Alto, California on April 23, 1951. Like many others, Chris's life on two wheels began while delivering newspapers on a Schwinn Stingray bicycle. Every day, Chris would pedal by neighborhood kids riding their dirt bikes in a vacant lot. After hanging around long enough, those boys let Chris have a turn, and he was hooked on dirt bike riding.
Well, I am so proud to see Chris Carter be acknowledged this way. Trailblazer Hall of Fame. Obviously, this man has done so much in his lifetime.
In 1965, Chris used his hard-earned savings to buy his own motorcycle. That bike was a Honda Scrambler. Chris rode that Scrambler on trails around the open lands of his Northern California home. Soon that paper route was replaced by another job. Chris was hired by a local dealership, A&A Motors, as a gunk brush. At about this time, future greats like Kenny Roberts, Jim Odom, and Mark Brailsford were launching their careers out of the same dealership. Still a teenager, Chris used to cut school on Fridays to drive these riders' bikes down south so they could race on Friday nights at Ascot. Soon the Honda Scrambler was replaced by a Greaves, and Chris began racing in local off-road and motocross events. By 1970, he was racing in the Trans Am Series on a pre-production Yamaha DT2 MX. Traveling with Gary Jones, Chris got to see a lot of the country and at the same time hone his riding skills. Chris also started riding for Yamaha in their off-road development program. Next, Chris qualified for the International 6-Day Trials. He competed in this event until 1977. He won a gold medal in Austria in 1976 and won the final motocross special test. In 1984, a Taiwan-based cable company asked Chris if he would be interested in representing its brand in the United States. He decided that if he were ever to start his own business, this was the opportunity. Chris suggested he become their exclusive distributor rather than just their agent. They agreed, and Motion Pro was born.
Chris Carter is an icon in this industry, and he deserves this award. While working at Yamaha, we started development in the mid-70s of the IT series, and Chris was the main test rider. He was able to relate very well to what was going on with the machines, and without him, it would have been much more difficult to complete the job.
Back then, cables were a real problem for most dealers to stock and to sell. Chris redesigned the whole process, making the packaging and identification of his products easier for distributors and dealers to inventory and determine the correct application. Chris even color-coded them red for Honda, green for Kawasaki, and so on. This was just the beginning of many innovations in products, parts, and specialty tools that have made Motion Pro one of the most successful aftermarket companies in the world.
You know, there have been so many innovators in the motorcycle industry, and I look at folks that I've met, for instance, Tom Einecker, who started Webco, Preston Petty, who was so innovative in making plastic fenders, riders like Paul Hunt, who did so pioneers, Dave Eakins. You know, all these people I've, in my years in the business now, been able to spend time with and call my friends. It has just been great, and I can't thank them all enough for helping me along the way.
They are currently celebrating more than 30 years in business. But Chris's involvement with the sport and the industry goes far beyond his business. He simply loves motorcycles and everything about the sport, the people, and the whole culture. He still rides and tests new products and gives back to the sport of motorcycling in every phase. For example, Motion Pro is the official tool sponsor for the American World Trophy and Junior World Trophy teams. And Motion Pro sponsors virtually every professional dirt track racer in the USA. They also work with Supercross, road racing, motocross, and off-road racing teams. Chris is a historian of the sport, sponsoring a book on Honda's dirt track history as well as collecting many important vintage motorcycles once ridden by Hall of Famers. Riders like Don Imdy, Bubba Schobert, and Preston Petty.
Chris is an aficionado of old motorcycles, particularly what we call pre-1916 bikes. In fact, I rode my first pre-1916 bike. It belonged to Chris Carter. I've never ridden anything that old or anything, quite honestly, that was that complicated to ride. But Chris supports all of the old bike events, rides them himself, and has a collection of old bikes that's really to die for. Chris Carter, the ultimate aficionado for old motorcycles.
He also serves on the American Motorcycle Association's Hall of Fame Museum Board of Directors and supports many charitable and nonprofit organizations. Organizations like the Blue Ribbon Coalition, the California Off-Road Vehicle Association, Christa Camps, and the Trail Preservation Alliance, along with Riders for Health, Oasis for Kids, and many more. Chris Carter is truly an inspiration to the sport and to the industry he loves.
And thanks again so much for bestowing upon me the honor of being included with this fine group of people in the Trailblazers. Thanks.
Because of his lifetime dedication to the sport, industry, culture, and history of almost every aspect of motorcycling, Chris Carter is also receiving the Trailblazers' inaugural Lucile Flanders Award. This award is named after the late Lucile Flanders, matriarch of the Flanders Company. Lucile's involvement in the motorcycle industry and also the Trailblazers dates back to the early days of motorcycling. She was a great supporter of the sport throughout her life.
I'm so glad that the Trailblazers have decided to give this award in honoring my mother. Mom, we really remember you.
The Trailblazers proudly welcomes Chris Carter to the 2015 Hall of Fame.
I'd rather ride on my